All right, so let's start with the AWS services now. So under the AWS training track 1, we will be covering EC2. So let's jump right into it. So what is an EC2? Now, EC2 is basically ECC, which is actually abbreviated to EC2 because there are two C's. So the full form is Elastic Compute Cloud. Now, there is a definition that is given on the AWS website. So this is the definition if you see right on your screen. So this particular definition is a little complicated for you to understand. Then what you really need to know is what it really is. It's basically a virtual machine or VM in the cloud. So what does that mean? So you know what is a cloud. We had discussed this on the previous track. So we know that cloud is like a data center hosted by the service provider, and the virtual machine is basically something which is there that they are sharing with you. So it's an infrastructure as a service, and that is being provided by AWS in this case. Now moving on, so now that you know that AWS is providing you this, where does it provide you and how do I set up? So that's the next part that we are going to see. So where do I set this up? So for this you have to understand regions. So regions are physical locations where AWS hosts its cluster of data centers. So these data centers are where you can actually go ahead and host. Now there are like 20 plus AWS regions total. Mumbai is also a region. Now each region consists of multiple isolated and physically separated AZs within a geographical region. Now you might ask me, what is an AZ? So AZs, so that's the next part of it that we're going to see. So AZs are basically availability zones, and an availability zone is nothing but they are discrete data centers which are completely separate. So they're separate by not only just location, they are separate by redundant power, they are separate by networking. So they are usually around 20 plus kilometers apart. So that is how the within a region they are 20 plus kilometers apart, and there are over 60 availability zones around the world. Now, so you can just take it as there is a region within which you have multiple availability zones. So that is what you need to know to begin with. Where do I set this up? So you have a region, and within a region you have multiple availability zones. So for example, Mumbai is a region and Mumbai has 3 availability zones. So we are going to be provisioning, when you're going into the labs, we will be looking at the Mumbai region where I'll be creating the resources. So this particular region has actually 3 availability zones. We'll look into that much more in the lab sessions that we are going to have. So let's move on to the next part of it. So now let's see what type of EC2 instances are allowed. So there is like let's start with the on-demand one. So basically on-demand is basically a pay fixed rate by hour or by second nowadays. So there is no commitment that you have to go. Basically what this means is that, okay, I want a particular EC2 instance and I don't know for how long I need it. So there is nothing like, I mean, you don't have to give them a commitment like, okay, I have to give it a commitment like 2 years, 3 years. I don't have to give a commitment. Maybe I need it for a day, or maybe I need it for a week, maybe a month, or maybe a year. So this is basically, if I'm going to use it only for a day, I'll only have to pay for that particular day. So that is basically a fixed rate, and I have to pay for the amount of time that I've used it. So that is why it is called on demand. The second style is the spot instances. Now spot instances, immediately you should remember the tickers. So basically the tickers, by tickers I mean the stock market tickers. Now, so how this works is basically you need something for a application. Your application is there, you have basically a need for a high compute module. Now if you go for an on-demand here or on-demand here, the thing is you're going to be charged a huge amount, even if it is for only a small amount of time. So spot instances gives you an option that you can bid for these instances and you can get it for I mean dirt cheap, really. So you can get it for dirt cheap. The only problem with spot instances is that I mean, the moment you are going to be outbid, you are going to, I mean, basically when you're going to be outbid on the same this thing, they will take it back. So they will give you a warning and they will take it back. So if you don't care about I mean, if your apps are flexible and you don't care that, I mean, okay, I need only for this much time, I'm okay with them taking it back at some time, you are sure of that, then yes, spot instances is a choice because it will greatly reduce your costs. The next part is the reserved instances. Now, reserved instances, as the name suggests, it's reserved capacity for you. So, I mean, you have a commitment of 1 year or 3 year term here. So, if the more you pay upfront, you will get these instances at a cheaper price. So, but here you need to know that, okay, my application is gonna stay with me for a year or 3 years. So then you can go ahead with the reserved instances and you can use them. So under the reserved instances, you have standard reserved instances, convertible, and scheduled reserve instances. So what does that mean? So standard reserve instances are basically the standard module in which you fix that, okay, I need, say, a particular type of instance and I need it for so and so time. So that is a standard reserved instances. But say tomorrow, if I suddenly feel that, okay, I've selected this type of instance, but tomorrow I need a high compute version of the same, I cannot go and change that. That is where convertible reserved instances comes into place, wherein which you can actually change at a later time. Now, scheduled reserved instances are basically, so for example, if there is a scenario in which, say, there is a company that is employing around 60 people, out of which 30 people need high compute for a particular period of time, and the other 30 come later on in the day, and they do not require this high compute, so you can reduce the cost there. So there can be a schedule that is set so that the reservation for the instances keeps on fluctuating between the high and low. So this is what is the scheduled reserved instances. And so these are the reserved instances. And then you also have dedicated hosts. Now, dedicated hosts are not for on-demand, spot, and reserved instances. These are all within a shared purview. Now, for dedicated hosts, these are basically not shared. They are dedicated physical EC2 instances, wherein which you can even own your own, you can actually use your own licenses as well. So that is what a dedicated host mean. Now, if you're going for a dedicated host, the costs are definitely going to be higher because they have to give you physical EC2 instances, and which can be used by only you and nobody else. So it's not a shared purview, and basically it would cost you a lot. So that's what we have seen in the EC2 types of EC2 instances. Now let's go ahead and see what are the instance types. Now that was the type of EC2 instances, basically how you are going to get those EC2 instances. Now what these EC2 instances are made of. So basically the types of EC2 instances, that is what we're going to discuss here. Now you need not actually bother about remembering the whole thing, but it is going to give you a basic idea. So if you go to the AWS website, you will get the details of the families of the EC2 instances. So this is the instance type that you will select while preparing an EC2 instance. So I'll just run through a few of them so that you will get a general idea of how you can select them. So the F1, there is an F1 family. F1 is the number here, F1 or I3, the G3. So these are basically the versions of the family types. So it's basically the F part or the I part or the G part that you need to bother about. So the versions of it will be obviously, as the higher the number, the better the version of that particular family. So for example, if I'm going for something like say it's a T3, so it's a low cost general purpose instance type that you're going to select. So this is for general purpose that you're going to use it. If you're going for F1, it's programmable gate array, and which is basically what it means. It is the use case. If you see, it's genomic research, financial analytics. So basically, it's the number crunching, big data analysis. For that, this family will be used. So similarly, for each of these families, you have a different specialty, and you can check out the use cases online, and then you can select accordingly. So if you think that it is going to be a high processing thing, then you can choose one family. If you think that one is going to use this for graphic intensive work, then obviously you will select another family. In this case, it would be G that you would be using. If you think you are going to use it for machine learning, then you'll use it for something like the P family. So there are different things that you have here. There's a lot of possibilities that you can use this. I mean, you need not need to remember this entirely, but if you do want to remember, there is an easy way out for that as well. So how you can remember is just basically reduce this to fight Dr. Pixie AU, which is basically if you see this FIGHT MC, which is mech, and Pixie is, so the denotion would be fight doctor. This is McDonald's mech, and this is Pixie. The Pixie is like a fairy thingy, so that you can remember. And AU is for Australia, so this way you can remember it. Now this is, I have taken it from one of the places I learned it from. So yeah, so you can, if you want, you can actually remember this. So this is a way to remember it, but nobody is going to ask you if you don't remember this. You can actually go ahead and refer this from the Amazon website whenever you need to create them. So that is what is about the instance types. Now let's jump into, so now you have set up, so basically now you have set up your, you know where it is set up. You know the type where you can purchase the purchase types, or how you can get it from AWS. Now you also know that what all use cases that you can use this particular instance for. So according to that, you know the instance types. Now once you have these thing ready, you have to get the underlying hardware of this. So you're selecting the underlying hardware, so you want the hard drive. So EBS is the hard drive type here. So let's take a look at what all EBS types are allowed. So we go into the EBS types. So the first one is general purpose SSD. So basically this is what we generally use. So in the labs also we're going to see this. General purpose SSD is what we are going to use most of the times. What is the advantage of this? It has balanced pricing, so it's neither too high, neither too low, but it gets the work done because the speeds are optimum and you will get that. And for most workloads, actually, it would be more than sufficient. So this is what we generally use. Now, if you have something for high performance, like basically it's a critical app, or you have a database which has a lot of read writes, if something like that you need, then the IOPS need to be higher. So what is an IOP? It's basically the input outputs that are there on that particular SSD. So particularly here, as the name suggests, it would be provisioned IOPS SSD that you'd be looking at. Now moving on, the next type is basically throughput optimized SSD. Now these are basically low cost things in which your I mean it's going to be frequent access, but basically it is not that you need a whole lot of speed that is required. So this is going to be your throughput. So the data inflow and outflow will be huge, but it's basically a low cost option that you will have. This can be used for things like data warehousing, or you have big data, so you can use this for that. So moving on, then you have cold HDD. Now the cold HDD is not generally used for the main drives of the EC2 instances. So this is the lowest cost. It is very less frequent access. It's basically used for file servers. Now file servers, you don't go ahead and copy files from the file servers every single day. Obviously you don't. You're gonna for those things, you're gonna use things like databases. But for the so I mean file servers and all, you barely, I mean, once you need some installer, say you want certain files, you say, so these things are not going to be used on a regular basis, only when required. So that is why you use cold HDD. And finally you have the EBS magnetic, which is a previous generation thing. So, and as the name suggests, these are magnetic drives, unlike the SSD drives, which are much faster. So here the workloads are for infrequent access of data. So now out of these, actually there are only three of them which are generally used for I mean, when you are going to set up EC2 instance, your base volume or your root volumes that you have on your EC2 instances, basically give you three options. You can have general purpose SSD, you have provisioned IOPS, and you can go for EBS magnetic. Now these are the three that are offered. So you will see that in the lab sessions more so. So I mean, you will see that you're gonna see both of them. You will be given all five of the options when you're going to create another EBS volume, but the root volume, you only have three options that I mentioned. So let's move on. So now you know the EBS types. Now there are certain things, certain other things that we need to discuss here before going into the hands-on labs. So let's go ahead and do that before going forward. First and foremost is the AMI. Now, AMI is an Amazon machine image, which is basically, I mean, you can call this like, okay, so I'm not sure how many of you must have installed OS on your machine. So if you go ahead and install those, I mean, install OSs on your machines, at some point of time, if you've done it in the past, you used to have disks to actually write onto it. Now there used to be an image for that particular disk, and you used to write that onto a say a DVD or a CD earlier, and you used to put that disk into your machine and then start the installation from there. So the AMI is basically something like that. So I mean, you can have, there are two types of it. There is an EBS and an instant store. So you have the I mean, AMI is based on that. We'll discuss that much more in the practical sessions, but what you have here is basically you can set an image according to what your requirements are. So you can have an Amazon image, say with the LAMP stack. So basically it can have the LAMP stack installed. You can have an Amazon image with, say, a WordPress install. We're gonna do a practical in which we are gonna actually create that WordPress site using an image. So these things we're going to check out in the practicals much. So you'll have a better understanding of this in the practical sessions. So that is basically what you need to know about AMI to begin with. Now then there is a thing called security group. Now security group, you can relate it to the firewall of a machine. So basically an EC2 instances, basically an EC2 instance, any incoming or outgoing is like basically handled by the virtual firewall. So this can be taken as a virtual firewall. This you're gonna take it much further because this is an important thing to understand. So we will be taking that as a separate topic altogether. You will have a basic idea about this in the practical session that we're gonna do immediately after this, but you will get a much more better idea of this basically in the VPC part of it, where we will be discussing this and the NaCl. So obviously, so that there it comes, the VPC, that's the next part of it. So the VPC is basically the underlying network you're setting it up, setting up your EC2 instance on. So that is basically what you need to know. Obviously, again, so like I said, we're going to discuss this as an entirely different topic, because you need to really understand this when you are understanding AWS and its services. So VPC is something that we will be definitely be covering up in the later on sections. So let's not waste time here. Let's move on to the next thing. So again, now subnet is the range of IPs in your VPC. Now, so once you set up your VPC, you are going to have a set of addresses that you can use here. So that is what is subnet. So there is a range that you can set it up. Your VPC, you can set it up with a range of IPs, and this is what is the subnet here. So and now under that, now once you create the EC2 instances, you can actually tag it. So basically you can give it a name. You can tell that, okay, I need this to have this particular name. I can put it with a, say, unique identification number, so I can put that in. I can put it with certain more tags. So if I'm creating an EC2 instance for the admin team, so I can tag it for admin team. If I'm putting a tag for, say, within the admin team, only this user should be using this, I can tag that also on this. So there are a lot of things that we can use tags for. Even you can use these tags for security things also. We'll come to that later, but just to give you a brief idea, okay, tags are what we use for basically creating a uniqueness to that particular EC2 instance. Now, the next part of it is basically the key pair. Now, this is very important to understand. So, if you need to access these EC2 instances that you create, so these EC2 instances have a key pair. What does that mean? You have a public and private key here, and then you can use this to actually access the EC2 instances. Or a better way of explaining is that, okay, there are a lot of padlocks, and you have a single key in your hand with which you can actually go ahead and open it, and you'll see how we use that later on. So because why I say there are multiple padlocks, say I have like 10 instances that I've created, and I'm going to have a single key for accessing all of them. So I can do that by using the key pair. So if I'm associating a particular key pair with a EC2 instance, I can go ahead and access that particular EC2 instance using that key pair. So these are the things that we're going to cover under that. So now before going into that, let's see what we will be covering under the what we require for the lab sessions to begin with. So what I would like all of you to have is basically an AWS account. So I'll be sharing the details to how to get your own AWS account. You will get a free tier account to actually learn. If you want to learn AWS, they allow you to have a trial account basically for 1 year. So you need to provide your details there and create an AWS account. I'll be providing details of how to do that in the description. So that I need you guys to set up an AWS account. Now then you need to download Putty and PuttyGen. So basically Putty is a software. You can if you just search Putty in Google, you'll find it out what is Putty, and PuttyGen comes as it usually comes as a package. You can go ahead and install that. It's pretty straightforward. It is you will see what it is in the sessions, but before going into the sessions, I would like you to have this ready with you guys, so that you can actually run along. You can do it along with me doing it on the session itself. So that is one thing. And then you have WinSCP. Now this is not absolutely necessary, but this is a very helpful tool when you're using Windows as the base and you want to transfer something to your Linux based EC2 instances. This is the way to go. So I would suggest go ahead and install Putty and WinSCP. So these would be the tools that would be helping you. There are other tools around, but this is what I prefer because it gives you a very basic idea. Then you can build from there on. So these three things are the requirements of the lab sessions. And then basically now let's see what we're going to discuss in the practical sessions. Before I jump into the practical sessions, let's see what we're going to discuss there. So the things that we're going to discuss is basically, so we're going to discuss about the basically the network interfaces. Now that we have set up the machine and everything, you need to connect it. Now how do we connect it? So we need a network interface. So how AWS provides you is basically it's a virtual interface that you will be getting, and this is basically the ENI. So usually we use the Elastic Network Interface. Now the Elastic Network Interface, you can actually go for something like Elastic Network, under which you have an ENA and VF. Now ENA is basically an Intel based service, and so these are the services that are provided there. So we'll discuss this much more in the practical sessions. And there is an Elastic Fabric adapter also. again, we are not going to use the latter two, elastic network or the elastic fabric adapter, but it is just for your understanding that we're going to discuss it there. But we will be using the elastic network interface. I'll get into that in the sessions. Then we will be looking at EBS snapshots. Now, basically, it's snapshots of volumes. Now, if you have ever worked in the infrastructure, IT infrastructure, you know that basically there are backups that are needed for your hard drives. So basically, you can take this as the snapshot of that particular drive. So snapshot is basically an image of as is of that particular that drive at that point of time. So you can just take it like, okay, I've just taken a snapshot of that particular drive at that particular time. So that particular photo will contain all photo, or the snapshot here basically will have all the data that you require. So you can, what is the advantage of taking an EBS snapshot is that basically you can actually recover from that. So if something goes wrong after that particular time frame, and if the machine has to be restored, you can use this EBS snapshot to actually do that. Now, volume encryption is again to do with security. So you can actually encrypt all the data on the drive, or you can actually encrypt the drive itself. So we'll see how to do that again. Now, these are things that we're gonna discuss further in the session. So that is what we're gonna do that. Now, there is another service that we'll be discussing other than the EC2 in this, which is CloudWatch, basically, which is a performance monitoring. So if you go to the task manager, you will see the task manager on a Windows instance. You see that there is a performance counter that comes up. So CloudWatch is something in which there is a cloud performance index that is created, and that is how you can check the performance of a particular instance that you have built. So CloudWatch lets you do that. Default is 5 minutes. You can get a detailed report here. It is a chargeable thing, and it can be done for around every minute for that matter. So that is CloudWatch. Now moving on, then we're gonna see, so there is a section called user data that you can use. So we're gonna see what this is used for. It is a very it is basically something which allows you to create an EC2 instance, and while it is spinning up and it is ready, before you use it, you don't need to go into the server and install or do a certain set of certain stuff of admin controls that you need to do. You need not do that here, but you can actually put that as a code within the user data, and the user data will do that for you. So basically, instead of going and accessing the machine and installing a certain set of required software or some admin things, like say you need a particular file or something like that, so these things can be handled by user data. So user data is basically a script that you run after the machine comes up. So that is what you're going to do in creating a particular machine, and I'll see how that works. So this we're going to repeat multiple times. It's a very common thing to use, and this is basically a bootstrap script. So bootstrap script is basically, what it means is running it after your machine starts. So that is what is a bootstrap. So now moving on, we will check what is metadata. Now metadata is basically the data about your instance. What does that mean? So the metadata basically gives you all the details of the instance that you have created. What it means is it gives you the name of the instance, it gives the IP of the instance, it gives you almost every detail that is there for with which the EC2 instance is created. Now, how do you get that? There is an internal address that you can follow. So this is the address that you need to follow, and this address, and then whatever requirement you have, if you put that in, you will get the information. And this is basically there for every single instance that you create. So it is separate for every instance. So that we will see again after we create an instance, we're going to run into that. So we will check that how that works. So we will do that.